full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to tonight's edition of Education Tonight. Leroy, we're putting the band back together.
We are putting the band back together, yeah. Did you get yourself in a queue for tickets for Mad for It, did you?
Sunshine. Yes, I did, Brent. Thank you. I think kind of looking at the reports, I think I got away with it. I think we didn't get hit by the dynamic pricing, which is kind of the in vogue at the minute. But I think there's an important thing here, just generally about kind of, I've said this, we've been doing inductions all week. I've been telling pupils kind of all week to just to kind of watch these things as things unravel, because for me, these are just business lessons. These are just about dynamic pricing strategies. This is all stuff that we really struggle to talk about all the time.
Are we doing the
and it's kind of
101?
Yeah, basically, yeah, it's really keen. But so we've all been on
middle-aged people on one axis.
It's all there, isn't it? You've got demography, you've got marketing, you've got price, you've got everything. But anyway, we'll do another podcast on business studies. You've got a history meetup, haven't you, in a couple of weeks coming up?
Yeah, we've got teachers history meet up in Manchester. I'm delivering a little bit of a talk on Middle Eastern history. So that's my first ever. Being let out for the weekend, woohoo! Manchester, mad for. Oh, actually, heading up to Manchester. I wonder if I can go see Liam and Frank and the boys.
But I think is you saying you've been let out for the weekend. I think that's kind of just your normal weekend, isn't it? You're kind of out and about doing lots of stuff anyway.
Oh well, it's getting a bit like that. But first week back, so yeah, new classroom, 21st year of teaching, fourth classroom in 21 years. Went over the summer, and me and the rug doctor got busy. So we had so I lifted cleaned my own carpet, painted the room, brought my kids into school, and they were disgusted with the chewing gum under the table. So I've decided I'm going to put in a requisition for new tables.
You've been scraping, but it's the first. We want to start on a fresh. So we promised we'd get kind of ads in early, because we are kind of neglecting our sponsors, Brent, and we want to get Frank on, and we've got Edmund coming on as well as the advert says, to talk about Ofsted, and we've got we'll have a little chat about back to school. So John Katz, hello John, back in the house. As always, this does, as it seems to be happening kind of regularly, this show is brought to you in partnership with John Katz Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools all around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johnkatzbookshop.com to explore a full range of titles. Use code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. And you can see it just coming across the bottom there. And we're also pleased to say we've also been sponsored by Futurum Careers, which provide a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. They help teachers to show their students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all resources align with the Gatsby benchmarks and are free to download. So visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. So I'm definitely going to look into that one, as well as always John Katz is good for those resources. I just want to kind of just play this video is brilliant. I just want to, before we get on to Frank today, because we are going to we do want to focus on this, but this just really made me laugh today about how people feel on that first day back after school. So
which is my first day, which is literally
Yeah, well, let's see if you see this, because I've been back kind of a few weeks now, so I'm kind of back in the zone. But this is for a lot of teachers, first day back today. This is how they feel walking through the door. Isn't that just basically kind of how we all feel on that first day? It's absolutely brilliant. So thank you, Mr. P, ICT, Mr. P as well, because his resources are fantastic and an absolute legend. Talking about legends, at the bottom of our screen, I can see that Frank Norris has kind of popped up. So hi, Frank. Good evening.
Hello, folks. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Tired after the first day, Frank, you know. Tired after the first day, you know?
Those days are behind me, Brent.
It's like getting on the bike, though. You have that nervous energy when you see the kids in front of you, and you look at them and you go, "Taught your father, taught your father." And then you sort of think, "Can I do this?" And after 5 minutes, it's like riding the bike. You just get back in the groove. And after a couple of hours of it, you're going, I haven't been away for the last 6 weeks. We've got this memory. 190 odd days left to go to the next 6 weeks. So, yeah.
Yeah, so half time and Christmas seems a long way off at the moment, doesn't it?
Yeah. So we promised to get you back on, obviously, with the end of the big listen, and obviously fortuitous as well, considering this week's announcement with Ofsted. There's a definite sort of closing of a loop there, isn't there? Both the listens. And obviously the inquest into Ruth's death, and then the change of government, and then obviously change of leadership in Ofsted, and then we have the announcement this week as well. So that's things are coming to a head, aren't they? With what's happened there. What's your read of the announcement this week, then, Frank?
Well, I suppose I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised by the sort of nature of the reports. So I was concerned. I mean, we started the Alternative Big Listen because we were concerned that there might be a little bit of sort of covering up going on. I think that the most telling element of the report was the Dame Christine Gilbert report in the annex, because that talked about the culture within the organization. And I don't think that Christine, I think she got as close to the heart of the issues that we were aware of as anyone could. And I think that current HMI, former HMI, who I speak to, that rings with her report rings with what people were telling me. So I think the issue for me is I'm pleased that there's a new government to tackle this. I think that's a good start. There's a lot to do. I think it's also heartening that the new chief inspector, has actually sort of shown a willingness to grasp some of the issues. But the thing that's caught the headline is this sort of loss of the 1 and 2 word judgments, and I think I have a concern about that. Not the loss of it. I think that I saw the loss of the judgments being about the sub judgments as well, not just about the OE judgment, the overall effectiveness judgment, because I think we're going to end up with an algorithm being formed by schools anyway with the sub judgment. So they'll say, well, we got 3 goods and 1 not so good, so that means we're good overall, sort of thing. And there'll be
it's like the old national curriculum levels. So you sort of think schools still tie into this, will still want their headlines, they'll still want the banners, they'll still want to say we're a good or outstanding school.
Yeah, sadly, I think some of them do. And I think one of the heartening things on a broader front is, which sort of comes through, I think, in the report from Ofsted, is this need to interrogate schools a little bit more deeply in terms of their relationship with other schools nearby. So I think I've always taken the view that we serve an education service, for the country, not just for a particular community or a school. I mean, I think the way we inspect individual schools means that can easily be, well, I'm fine, we're doing quite well here. I know the school down the road is not doing quite so well. And partly of that is because we're actually picking off some of their more able students or some of their more able staff, or not able staff, but more sort of, I don't know, certain staff where we've got a shortage. We're quite happy to say that.
Do you think, though, that is a symptom of academization, market forces, and semi-privatizing of education, setting the schools against? Because I come from a time when my local schools and I used to collaborate. We used to go to there. We used to network. When we all looked at authority, we weren't in competition with each other. We weren't fighting over children because children equals an amount of money. We weren't in trouble financially. There was collegiate and localism, in a sense that we worked together and had really good work. We used to have a drama teacher come into our school from a local school, and now they wouldn't do that, because why would they lend us a teacher to we get a better point score?
Well, we did, Brent, didn't we? We shared a 6 foot at one point.
We shared 6 foot.
That was the best situation for that local environment.
Yeah.
Then both those two schools that were local authority became academies. And then that working relationship completely broke down from that point of view. Both schools then tumbled down the Ofsted ratings, didn't they?
Yours was more so than mine, because yours was more vocational when they changed the goalposts.
Yeah, we were Ofsted 1 until that then it kind of tumbled and spiraled to the point where it is still classed as a failing school in a kind of multi-academy trust. And children are actually leaving in their droves, and parents are really unhappy, and there's that kind of whole kind of issue. Do you think, Frank, there is a way?
I just come to that, Adam, because I think sadly I'm a bit older than you, and my first headship was in 1988, and that was going on then.
Okay.
So, and I think that. I do take the point that Brent's making that, I suppose it's not so much about academization as, which I think there may be some academy trusts that are doing that. But I think that, I think one of the good things that came from COVID was that suddenly everybody was, out there having to help each other. I was leading I was the independent chair of the education board in Blackpool. And actually, I saw so much collaboration. It didn't matter what trust you belonged to. It didn't matter what school you went to. People were mucking in to try and help. And I think that some of the outcome of that is I'm no longer chair there, but I know that I stood down in February. But actually, that collaboration was still going on. So I think that, I think some multi-academy trusts may still want to do that. I do sense a little bit more collaboration and cooperation, and I think the new government and potentially Ofsted's new framework will shine a light more on those sorts of behaviours, and because that also impacts on SEND, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It also impacts on admission arrangements in schools. So I think that all of that needs to be much more at the heart of the new framework to sort of ensure that it shines a light on those schools that are actually not really serving the broader community, but just serving their own interests. So, I'm not quite sure it can all be down to academization, even though it might, some of it might be.
Yeah.
No, I know. It's the competition imperative of. Yeah. It's the same as the exam system. I equate the exam system as well. Some kids win, some kids lose. But the odds are stacked against you, working class kids in a deindustrialized area, which has got sink estates and 14 years of austerity. Social mobility in those areas is getting worse. Educational outcomes in those areas are getting worse. Health outcomes are getting worse. You can't tackle all this. Ofsted then come in and say your attendance is terrible and judge you as a poor school. But the things that you're being judged against are outside the control of that school. They've got no control over the crime statistics. They've got no control over poverty. They've got no control over the deindustrialization of the Midlands and North and all of that leveling up stuff. And education has carried the can, I think, for a lot of failures of social policies, which Ofsted have never really factored in, because they come in, they judge the school and say, what are you doing to get attendance up? Well, you can only do so much considering the area and location you're in. And until that's sort of taken into consideration, the broader context of the school, and it's always taken into consideration in the commentary. It was always, there was quite a lot of work done on that, but it was never taken into consideration when you had the grading. So how do you then, my question is, how do you then grade a school without grading a school? You see what I'm saying? How can you grade a school without actually using a grading system? By what metric do you measure then?
Yes.
What can you measure that allows a school to be judged fairly, is what I'm saying, Frank, without sort of judging it against things that just cannot do anything about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, I think, and Christine Gilbert's report made clear, that actually if you get excellent inspectors, you end up with excellent inspections. And actually, I think that I recall I started inspecting. I had a secondment for a year in 1995, and I was tutored, mentored throughout that year. When I then went back to headship and then became an HMI in 2001. And even though I'd done a lot of inspections, I was still mentored for the entire year. And in that year, I visited some of the most exclusive independent schools in the country, which I'd never visited. I visited some of the secure estate. I visited a number of PRUs, did inspections in Germany. I did everything in that year. And what that did, it gave me an understanding about the bits of the education service that I'd never seen before. Now, the thing is that if I'm coming in, having worked in 2 schools to be an inspector, it's coming into your school, Brent, and it's in a community that I'm not familiar with, and I'm coming from the background of just 2 schools, I'm not bringing a lot to that discussion, to that sort of the context of your situation. Yeah. So I do think that Christine's point about quality inspectors is at the heart of this, and I think that at the end of the day, Ofsted doesn't accept that it's been going for volume over quality. All right. Yeah. So Christine's report said that they were. Ofsted deny that. I think that there is a risk here that if we have so many part-time inspectors coming from quite narrow backgrounds, that's going to lead to some sort of problems down the line, whether that's
we're in the same situation as teachers, aren't we? We can't recruit inspectors, we can't recruit teachers. Yeah. And the problem is if you've got substandard inspectors, poor inspectors, you've got an inconsistent system, haven't you? You've got you look at the draw, you've got an inspector, and we had that situation where, as a subject specialist, I'm told to almost dumb down my schemes of work to make them understandable for a non-specialist. Should I get a non-specialist, they won't be able to understand the intricacies of history. And we talked about this before. I've had, when I was Ofsted with citizenship, I had the lead inspector for citizenship. He was able to give me one-to-one advice that was a very, very collegiate, very, very affirmative thing, where I got, legitimate advice from somebody who knew more than me. Like, they were almost mentoring me because they had that experience. But if we're not having people going through the education system, teachers wanting to become Ofsted inspectors, where do we recruit the inspectors from? And we don't have any money. So you're not going to have much money and time is a factor as well, because there are schools needing inspecting now. So how quickly can Ofsted retool itself, recruit, turn it around and flip things that they're the new Ofsted? You see what I mean? It's
Lucy, stop. Can I just sub-point to that, because Edmund's here, and good evening, Edmund. About the kind of it was in the report as well around there was the treatment of inspectors generally. There's a quote about Ofsted inspectors kind of being put up in kind of pubs with rooms to write their reports. They're feeling kind of vulnerable, and they weren't great conditions to kind of put staff in, just from a kind of human resource kind of point of view. Does that kind of lead into what Brent's saying about getting the right people, getting them to stay, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the first set of inspection 1994, but we're still inspecting the same sort of level of frequency as we were then. Even though our knowledge of schools has vastly increased, So for me, the question is, if we want to go for this crazy idea that we've got to inspect all these secondary schools within the 5-year period, we'll end up with having to cram that, get inspectors in. Some of them are going to be doing just part inspections, part-time work. And we're going to end up, I think there's a risk that we're going to end up where we are now. For me, the suggestion is that we will have this safeguarding audit, visit, whatever it is, that more frequently. That might be every year, might be every 2 years. I'm not quite sure what the detail is of that. I think that's very helpful, because actually, if I was involved in that, and actually you can tell fairly quickly when you're in a place as to whether or not it feels right. You know, I can't tell you why. It's probably when I used to be away from home working for Ofsted down in London Monday to Friday. I'd come in Friday night. My wife would have told me that everything was right on those phone calls every night. I'd walk in and know it wasn't. I wouldn't really need to speak to too many people to know it wasn't. So I think that some of that stuff can actually feed into a sort of risk assessment around schools. And I'm not convinced that we should be spending loads of money on inspecting schools as frequently as we do now. And if we don't inspect as frequently, we've got a chance of actually using the quality inspectors that we've got to do a better job, a more incisive and insightful job in terms of
Frank, you had those instincts because you had the experience of being a head teacher, being in the school. You were an experienced individual who's lived through the school system, understands the school system, and therefore you had that gut instinct to know, obviously, when something's not right. So that's what we're not getting, because many head teachers have left. How many head teachers now would want to be an Ofsted inspector when 9% left the profession last year? This whole hot housing, the league tables, the toxicity of education is driving people out of education. So people who may have gone like yourself from being a head teacher and then going into a HMI are saying to themselves, well, I couldn't be,
No. And those that do, Brent, only stay. Yeah, those that do only stay about 3 years. So
and then they don't get that experience then, do they?
No, and when I joined, there were people there had been 24, 25 years in the inspectorate. That's and actually, I'm a member of the retired HMI group, and some of you see these people passing away. It's very sad, but they've got 30 years experience. They work for the inspectorate for that length of time, and so what happens is you walk into an organisation that feels secure about itself because it's got that sort of depth of history about it. Whereas if you've got an organisation that's primarily bringing HMI in and they're hopping in and then hopping out, you're developing the expertise, but you're not really realising the benefits of it. You're getting through the process, but they're moving on somewhere else and taking that knowledge and that expertise with them. That I think we probably, I was a big advocate for getting head teachers in as inspectors. I had a year out doing that. I was able in that year to be mentored to become a half decent inspector. I think that's probably a better way of doing it than actually putting people on a course, an online course, evaluate this, come out with me for an inspection, and you're right, you're on next month. That feels just too risky for me.
Yeah. So Edmund,
it's certainly definitely with the risk that we now know. And part of the reports, and I'll bring Edmund in on this point to react, is that there's a clear quote in the report that says there was no attempt by Ofsted in the early months of 2023 to contact the school or Ruth Perry's family. There seems to have been no understanding in Ofsted that this point that Ruth Perry's death was directly linked to the inspection itself. So we've had the reports. Edmund, what was your reaction this week?
Well, first of all, I want to pay tribute to Christine Gilbert because, as most people will know, I was deeply sceptical about her appointment. I thought that this was yet another case of
inside job,
its own homework. Former HMCI, but to be honest, and again, it's not something that I would have articulated in public until after the review was published. I knew from the moment I spoke to her, in that sense of that Frank had, the minute I spoke to her, I knew that she was going to do a proper job, because she was just so extraordinarily sensitive to everything that we were telling her, and incredibly receptive and determined that she was going to produce a review that was worthy of the coroner's intent, despite being given this ridiculous narrow frame of reference by Ofsted itself. And so my response, I'm astounded, because obviously there are things that I know about, there are things that I've experienced, there are things obviously I'm extremely familiar with the case that started this process off for me of this campaign to reform Ofsted in the first place. So there's nothing that I could, in a sense, that I could learn about that. But the elements that I find absolutely shocking are what we've discovered about in the internal structures and politics of Ofsted at the time this was all happening last year. It is one of those situations where it's not that I want to be sceptical of Martin Oliver's intentions to reform and create the inspectorate that we all want, that Frank has wanted, and that I've wanted, and that everybody wants. But
no. I want to get rid of Ofsted. Full stop.
Well, but you don't.
You can keep reforming all you want.
But you don't want to get rid of accountability, do you?
No, I don't want to get rid of
My
accountability.
argument always is, Ofsted, when it was created, was born of the remnants of the system that existed before it. If we get rid of Ofsted, whatever comes next will be formed from the remnants of Ofsted, because that, at the moment, that is the only place where there is any form of expertise at all. I mean, I'd love to have to do a greatest hits of inspectors and get all of the wonderful ex-inspectors that I know, Frank, Judy Price Grimshaw, any number of other brilliant people who've inspected, to come back and teach them how to do the job properly. But realistically, whatever phoenix emerges from these ashes is going to be born of what's there. So, but that is the irony of that, of me expressing that feeling, is that what I thought were the problems in Ofsted don't even the tip of the iceberg. So
you think you opened Pandora's box, basically? So your campaign really started the process of which then there's been a kind of opening up of a whole can of worms.
I think, Brent, I think that, for those of us who've got a long history with Ofsted, we've seen this transformation of the organisation. It wasn't, I think, the terrible events at Caversham, was a catalyst for significant shift and a focus in on that. But actually, many of us have been seeing this, for 10 years before. I left in 2012. Well, why did I leave? I think everybody you speak to as former HMI will say, well, there were issues previously, but nowhere near as bad as they got to.
Well, we felt that
at the end of the day, it's around leadership, isn't it? This is about leadership. It's the leadership of the inspectorate.
Yeah.
That's the thing I was going to go on to say. What Christine Gilbert says about governance within Ofsted is just so shocking. The board of governors, who are supposed to give oversight to the organisation, leadership, direction, inform what the HMCI is doing, appear to be absolutely toothless cutouts. With no ability to affect anything. And
so that's a pertinent question. In this week of weeks, when we hear, obviously with Grenfell, and we hear lessons are learned and all the rest of it, and we all sigh and go, what accountability is there? Who is going to be responsible? Who do we hold responsible? Is there a group of individuals, an individual, or is it the culture of the whole organization? Was it politicization of Ofsted? Was it directed down from the Department of Education? Where did it go wrong? And how do you feel? A direct question, and you don't have to answer this. How do you feel about the ex-Ofsted chief now getting a job in international education and seemingly doing a full kind of U-turn about the events and potentially looking for a rewrite of events? So who do we think is responsible? Do we want justice? Do we want somebody to say, look, this is where it went wrong? Is there a person, or is it systemic to the whole organization, is what I'm saying? Because if you're going to fix something, you got to acknowledge where it's going wrong, and you got to say, well, lessons have been learned. Well, lessons from who is and who, because let's be honest, if we were doing the same thing to a school, your head teacher is the one. Let's flip it round, because it's how many head teachers' careers have been destroyed without being held accountable, or how many chairs of governors have had to resign because their schools. So it's, who do we hold responsible for Ofsted if Ofsted has been holding people responsible, if that makes sense?
One of the things that I'd invite everyone to do, and excuse me looking over to the side here because I am looking at this document now, is to go back to the Common Select Committee on Education 2017, the document that was produced on the appointment hearings of Amanda Spielman, and read the comments that they say. And my goodness me, it's like they're looking into a crystal ball. They
didn't approve the appointment, did they? It was overridden by
the reasons they're giving for not approving the appointment, based on the answers she given, are things such as that that she didn't see it necessary to build bridges between the profession and Ofsted. She didn't consider the relationship between Ofsted and the profession to be important. It's an attitude of doing to rather than doing with, almost right from the start. There's also, I mean, there's sort of, it's fascinating.
Yeah, but that was her reaction, wasn't it? Afterwards, she went almost straight on the air afterwards and doubled down and said that I, as the chief inspector, needs to be able to give bad news. It was a kind of a doubling down of the facts. Kind of, I've done nothing wrong here. I have to be a person who can deliver bad news, essentially, irrelevant of how people might feel about that afterwards. That's their, almost like that's their problem.
Adam, good inspectors do that. They empathise with the people that they're inspecting. They take them on the journey, and even where you have some very sort of difficult news to get across, good inspectors can just lay out their evidence and lay it before people and do it in such a way that people accept it. And I think that the first time, I don't want to reveal too much here, but I met with Amanda Spielman a few weeks after the appointment, and I told the story before. You're away all week, you come back and you walk in and things aren't right. 5 minutes with that meeting, I knew things weren't right. You could just feel it, and you can understand why the select committee had concerns about it. But again, that was, one of the things that I know you've probably got a break coming up here, Adam, but one of the things that goes back to here is 2010. So for me, I was involved in framework development from from about 2005 through to 2012. When the coalition government came in, they realised that Ofsted and the framework was a really easy tool to get change in the classroom. You don't need to, and what would you go for? Do you go for an Education Act or a chance to take a framework through with very little negotiation, very little sharing? So obviously it's easier to put it into the framework. And so what happened was that coalition government started to lean on Ofsted from 2010 and started to want to fiddle around with bits and pieces. I remember speaking to Nick Gibb about special educational needs, and he wanted a separate framework. And I remember saying, well, actually, most of the kids with special educational needs are in mainstream schools.
So what you're really saying, Frank, is the political manipulation of Ofsted.
It was more at that stage, Brent. It was more subtle, and I think that's probably leading into Michael Wilshaw's time, where he had a big fallout with the Secretary of State. Some of this is around. Well, there's so far you can go with me as the chief inspector, but actually don't lean on me that hard, because actually, this is unacceptable. But I think with Amanda Spielman, they had somebody who actually, I think they felt as though they could lean on quite heavily. And for me, I don't know who told her to do this, but post-COVID, when Amanda Spielman said to inspectors, leave all that to one side. Let's just report now on all the other stuff, and let's ignore all that. So we ended up with inspection reports having a one sentence about all the work that schools had done during COVID. You think, well, actually, who's driven that decision? you know, because it's quite convenient to let's move on. Let's get everybody back.
Yeah,
you know,
but that had such an impact to subject leads at the time, because when we were reporting back on our own results, we weren't allowed to mention or talk about kind of COVID. I remember having these conversations, and then the bizarre thing was last year, I can't then start talking about attendance, even though that's linked to illnesses and COVID and that type of thing. Okay, I'm going to keep both of you on if that's okay, because I think this is going to kind of keep running for a bit. We do have to say hello to our sponsors, so if you both kind of just stay with us, we're going to put our sponsors on the screen for a couple of minutes, then we'll come back to this conversation. Okay, thank you.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. John Catt have an exceptional collection of book titles that cover a range of educational topics, ideas and research. The books are aimed at forward-thinking schools and support best practice teaching for both primary and secondary education. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
I think that was a kind of abrupt end to that advert. I hope they don't mind or withhold payment for that. We'd like to say thank you to both sponsors. It's education tonight, so thanks again for tuning in. We've got Edmund and Frank still with us. So we're discussing the Gilbert reports as well as the kind of the headline figures. But one of the things that was quoted in the report was that really there was no surprise to the school sector because there's a general feeling that Ofsted culture creates a feeling of stress, anxiety, and apprehension among leaders and staff. Edmund, obviously, kind of we know that the outcome of the Ruth Perry kind of incident, and that we've gone through that, but do you think there's a change there in the way that kind of the inspector will come into school and start, inspecting schools from this report?
Well, I mean, the difficulty that I have is basing. So if we sort of rewind, when I met Martin Oliver in January, and he talked to us, and he talked very understandingly and empathetically, and he very much, communicated his desire for a reform agenda. And I went away from that meeting thinking, we've got hope there. One of the things that he said to me very early on was, "Judge me by my actions." Now, the difficulty I have is that so far he has consistently talked about all the things he's going to do right, whilst in my mind doing a load of things wrong. So my ability to have faith in the reform is very much dented by the Big Listen, which was absolutely atrociously conducted, a terrible market research document. I mean, if they'd have paid a relatively small amount and got someone external in to literally teach them how to do market research, that would have been one thing. Asking the wrong questions in the wrong way, how they extrapolate percentage data from what they produced. And when you compare...
It's a bit of an irony in that, Edmund, isn't it? Because that's exactly where Ofsted reports get it wrong, because they're trying to boil down, things into measurable data, same as the league tables, measure schools. Here's our big listen measurable, which is about changing Ofsted, but the actual big listen is still doing the very thing we don't like Ofsted doing.
And when you compare what Frank and colleagues produced, the alternative big listen, on a fraction of the budget that Ofsted would have had to operate on, it just beggars belief. But there is also, I cannot get over specifically his response to the Regulation 28 Prevention of Future Death report issued by the coroner, where the coroner went through the issues, all of the contemporary issues with Ofsted, single word judgments, high stakes accountability, and conduct of the inspection to build up the picture of what happened at Caversham Primary, and said at the end of it, and no learning review has occurred to assess these issues at Ofsted. And that's, Ofsted was then supposed to go away and conduct a learning review into what happened at Caversham, what happened at that inspection, what happened to cause the event. And their response was to go away and ask an ex-chief inspector to do a review of Ofsted's reaction to Ruth Perry's death. It's a very important distinction. So again, the fact that we have this incredible review from Christine Gilbert is amazing to me. But I am hurt. I am hurt by this organisation. I am hurt by how it's responded to my good friend, to Ruth's sister, who has endured a grueling 19 months to get us to the place that we are now.
Can I ask a question about that? Because as someone who's campaigned on many issues, and campaigns are really draining, they take over your life. My long-suffering wife would say, and some of the environmental campaigns which I've got involved in have gone over, I think one was 10 years. And once you go down the rabbit hole, Edmund, you can't walk away. So my question is, from one campaigner to another, when will you think you can sort of say, right, it is over, we're done? We've set out, you have, from a campaign point of view, stunningly, it's hats off. But when will you think we've done it justice? When we sort of stop the campaign?
I wouldn't speak for Julia, but even then I can say to a certain degree, I think we're both in the same space, that really, so we had two, probably more than anything else, two things that we wanted to get. One, to get rid of single word judgments. Brilliant, that's done. But I think more important to that, especially now, is to have proper independent scrutiny, proper independent accountability, a mechanism by which people can be sure that when they make a complaint, that complaint is going to be treated seriously. And I'm not just talking about how inspections, the result of inspections, but inspector conduct. Still within these new proposals for changing the system is not this idea that there is a panel that has some external members that aren't on Ofsted that will randomly look at some cases to determine whether they came to the right conclusion is not good enough. It's still when you read it, it's a list of different organisations within Ofsted that Ofsted are going to create to mark Ofsted's homework. And you know, we need proper challenge and the ability to properly challenge. The evidence base needs to be transparent for a school. They need to know what they're accused of. Still, we get headlines that sound dire, but without any understanding. A school can still have no understanding about exactly what it was they were supposed to have done. We need that. We need not the CASO system is ridiculous, because all it does will look at an inspection and determine whether Ofsted follows its own protocols. It doesn't look at things like inspector conduct. It doesn't look at the wider picture, at mitigating circumstances.
So you're not finished.
No way.
I got that sense.
Not in the slightest.
I think that's just a question to Frank about the. You might be able to give us a little bit of insight on this about the recruitment of inspectors, because is it kind of there's individual kind of bad eggs within the system that are kind of behaving in an inappropriate way, or they're dealing with things, as you said, like not in an empathetic way, or there's something that's happening during that inspection that causes a breakdown in communication. They aren't able to kind of deal with that or adjust to it or whatever. There was a head teacher. I was out with some friends at the weekend, and I was told a story of a head teacher that's left a school not long after this event because an inspector walked into their office, slammed a load of paper down the desk, and said, "There's stuff in there, mate, that's career ending."
Can I just do a quote before Frank answers from Christine Gilbert's report, which she put, the review heard that at times there had been a reluctance to address conduct issues when they'd been raised, with people getting away with being unpleasant. It is vital that the appropriate behaviours are reinforced through recruitment, induction, and line management. People who are saying they'd never had a performance review the entire time they've been in inspection since their first probation period. Sorry.
Right. No, it's the quality over quantity issue again, isn't it? You know, at the end of the day, I think the issue is moving forward is having delivered a number of frameworks for Ofsted. Just think what's got to happen between now and September 25. This is what worries me, and who's actually going to be doing it. So we have Ofsted under the microscope like never before. So this time everything they're going to deliver is going to be analysed by the likes of Edmund and you and me and everything. It's then, it's that framework then has to incorporate a number of new judgments. The judgments are being realigned. There's a suggestion there's going to be more data coming back into it. We've then got to get to a position where at the same time, with the same people have got to deliver on a scorecard system, as well as between now and September, put out to the profession what they intend to do, then actually go and trial it, then evaluate it, then actually train up inspectors. They've then got to tell all the schools, this is the process. It's not a secret garden. Everybody needs to know the rules of engagement, and all of that being done by the same people who have led to this situation, apart from one or two senior managers, including the chief inspector. I mean, I wrote a tweet saying we need to wobble our heads to think that that's going to happen and be done really, really well.
Here's the thing in school, Frank. I'm sitting there in my first inset then, I'm going, here it comes. I'm waiting for the big old word, and I had to raise my hand and go, no point talking about what odds they were looking for, because you might as well be predicting the future there. You have no idea what we have, because it's changing, and rightly so. And it is, and schools need that clarity. As someone who's teaching in the classroom needs that clarity, because I do schemes of work planning, we do a lot of work. We do a lot of work behind the scenes to get ready for Ofsted. And that perpetuates all the way down from trust CEOs to head teachers to senior management to heads of department to, right, how your book's up to date. Ofsted don't look at your books a bit. Make sure your books are okay. Why? Because Ofsted's looking at your books. They may not never look at a book again. I don't know, but I've got to mark books because Ofsted may look at my books. I've got to make sure that my schemes of work are readable to a non-specialist, because just in case Ofsted brings in a non-specialist. These are the type of things that have been driving us in education to absolute insanity, meeting the needs of an ever-changing mosaic of individuals who you just don't know if you're going to have potluck, whether you get a good one or a bad one. That's the reality of what schools have been facing. A roulette. We've been playing Ofsted roulette. That's really what we've been playing. It's a lottery. And whether you win the lottery, you get a good inspector who understands your school and sees things your way, you get a good inspection. Great. You get another one who comes in, he's had a bad day, doesn't like the look of your school, or, as you say, Frank, doesn't get a good feeling about your school, then you get a bad report. And you, going back to what you're saying about the right of reply, you've got no right of reply, you just have to accept it, you can't challenge it. I think it replicates our exam system, which is inconsistent. It's just education is riddled with this inconsistency up and down. And yet we are the people who carry the can, because we're trying to educate the kids, because that's the problem, is we're the ones actually standing in front of the children trying to educate them. What are we trying to educate them with? We hope that what we're doing is right, but we've lacked that actual guidance. And that's the thing. I used to get guidance on what we used to have. Now it's, we have to do this. Why? Because we have to do it because Ofsted's looking for that. That's the culture shift. We're doing stuff because we're told to do it. We're not doing it because we believe we have to do it. We're told we have to do it to get through the hoops. And that's unfortunate, what's driving a lot of people out of education. Until that culture shifts to the fact that I'm trusted, our school is trusted, that people are trusted. That's the thing. And I don't think you can do that, going back to Frank's point, with the existing people who've been going in and inspecting, unless they completely culture shift or retool or reskill themselves, they're going to come back in and what's changed? Does that make sense?
Well, Christine's report made clear, didn't it, Edmund, that she expected there to be some introduction of some new talent into that senior leadership team. Yeah. But what's actually happened now, because Christine wasn't a big fan of the regional structure, because she could see that created different approaches, different line management approaches and things. So she's suggested they go back to a more centralized system, which in a way I can understand that. But there's a sort of real risk here, I think, in that we're sort of moving people around from a region into a center. If we're talking about the lack of performance management of senior staff, of HMI inspectors, actually, some of the senior staff have got bonuses over the last few years through all of this. So you have to question, well, if there is performance management going on in the senior echelons of the organization, what's it saying? Is it really as robust as it ought to be? Is it about delivering the number of inspections as opposed to the quality of them? Because this report suggests the quality is dubious, much more dubious than Ofsted's own questionnaires from its schools following inspection. So it really does start to unravel, I think, the way in which these senior managers have been working and how effective they've been.
I wonder if the rewards are not connected, though, to the sort of quite simplistic data-driven elements that the previous administration was so obsessed with, that they would want to trumpet the percentage of schools that were good or outstanding
we saw that during the election campaign. One particular individual kept saying, under our leadership, those schools have gone to outstanding to good under the previous. And you realize, our comment from one of our commentators there was literally that. You're boiling the unquantifiable down into quantifiable data, and that doesn't work, because you cannot, especially in dealing with children, somehow it takes years to do some of the things we're doing, and yet they want data, and data only tells you a part of the story. That's why the early inspections that I had, that they weren't data driven. Data was used as part of a mosaic, including inspections, including books, including conversations, including surveys from parents, including the wider community. And I think the community aspect has been lost massively. What the community feel about their school. And you take Ruth's school. I say it again, when I read that Ofsted report, that is the type of school I want my children to go to. That's the type of children, that's the type of school my children do go to. And if that school gets anywhere, if someone comes to that school and says that they're taking it over, I'm on that gate and I'm going to chain myself to that gate. They're not touching my child's school, because it is exactly the thing I think is a good school. A good school cares about the children, cares about the staff, is connected to the community. That's what education is about. And at the heart of this, for me, is the losing sight of the purpose and the function of education. And the purpose and function of education is to turn out well-rounded young individuals who are safe and who are confident and who have every opportunity. And that's not been happening, has it? We have exams, we have, lots of money in education, but it's not going to the correct place. And everything that's been tried doesn't seem to be successfully closing those gaps. SEND's got worse, recruitment's got worse. Ofsted has ultimately failed to drive up standards, while people are using data to say standards are driven up by those of us working in education. So worse,
Christine's report listed, these are the things that are going on in education at the moment. She actually listed a number of issues. They were budget pressures, the legacy of the pandemic, fertility in the school role, staff challenges, special educational needs, mental health, negative impacts of social media. When was the last report you read? Ofsted report about a school that spoke about those issues. And the issue, that is a political decision. It's not a good thing to be writing about those things, because that's really negative. So it's easier to write about lots of other stuff. So inspectors don't want to, they might want to engage with that, but by gum, they're not going to write about them. But that is, Ofsted has a requirement, the chief inspector has a requirement to report to Parliament on the quality of education in this country every year. If we're not reporting on those things, Parliament is being hoodwinked into thinking it's better than it really is. I think it's a really and it goes back to Edmund's point about the governance thing. This is really at the heart of why does Ofsted exist? It exists because Parliament wants it to exist. It has a relationship with the DfE, but at the heart of it, it's about reporting to Parliament on the quality of education. And that's why we do inspections. It's not to sort of, the safeguarding is an additional element to that. It's about getting evidence to report to Parliament. And we've forgotten all of this stuff. We really have. So at the heart of it, we've got to get inspectors telling the community, honestly, what are the challenges this school is dealing with at the moment.
Yeah.
Even if that is the community. Brent's saying the school down the road is creaming off all the best staff from this school.
The problem is, Ofsted blames the head teacher. Ofsted blames the senior management. You take what happened with Ruth. She felt so bad that she failed, and that she was made to feel that she was ultimately responsible for this. And she knew that the careers of her colleagues were in her hands. And all that was dumped on her. How many head teachers had the similar experiences where they've just been thrown under the bus? They've been thrown under the bus because there's that blame culture of, we've got to have somebody who we can say, you failed. And literally, we have a whole industry sprung up, because that's the other thing. We've got a whole industry of people now who are advisors, interpret the will of Ofsted, special consultants, people making a lot of money, going into schools saying, if you do these things, we'll get you through Ofsted. Gaming the system. So we have a whole system now of people trying to game the system, trying to interpret the will of Ofsted. And literally, we in the school are trying to teach children, and all this is just destroying our love of learning, our faith in inspections, because we get the pecking order. It gets pecked down from high above, then high, and all the way down. We have to implement this, and there's nothing short of demoralizing when you're told you have to do something because Ofsted's looking for that, and you want, I don't care about Ofsted. I care about those children. I don't give a crap about Ofsted. I care about the welfare of those children, and Ofsted be down. And that's how many of us have felt in education. It's just, it shouldn't have taken the death of one of our own to finally do this. And it shouldn't have taken that. It should have really, before now, it should have been solved and resolved. Anyway,
sorry, I'm just going to jump in, guys. I just want to, because we're just running slightly over, so I want to give kind of just Chris Wilkinson a quick shout. he's again on Podbean, and he's discussing teaching with visual impairment tonight. We're going to run just slightly over, if that's okay, gents, because obviously we've got a little bit more. We are going to cut it to 10 minutes though, just to kind of give you a heads up.
Mrs. Joyce will wonder where I am anyway. So
I think I'm getting looks from the lounge as well about you taking up the dining room. Edmund, this is at the heart of this is a personal tragedy. Have anyone from the report or Ofsted now reached out to the family at all? Are you aware of any kind of conversation that's gone on there?
No, but I will categorically tell you that that when put on the spot by Stacey Foster on ITV and by on Radio 4 about interaction with the family, and Martin Oliver trying to make out that he had been in constant contact with Julia, with Ruth's family, that is absolutely not true. The last contact with the family was in March. Since then, there has been one backdoor communication method, which has been deeply unsatisfactory in terms of what it's, delivered in terms of actual information. So many questions have gone unanswered, especially in the early days when it was announced that Christine Gilbert was going to, the justification for that choice never came. And then he said in an interview that Julia was given the documentation for the Big Listen and the review early. I'll tell you how early she got it. 4:30 in the morning early. That's when it landed in her in tray. And he was trying to make out it was days before. So, because the question being, why didn't she get it before the press? She got it about 4 hours before the press if she had been up at 4:30 in the morning. So, again, Christine Gilbert's job reviewing Ofsted's reaction, saying that they were complacent and that they were, tone deaf and seemed to be disinterested. To my mind, that they have never stopped doing that. There is not meaningful engagement with the family. So yeah, it's really I really do want to be positive. I really do want to not present like a naysayer, and anything that is automatically said I'm shooting down. If Martin Oliver does everything that he says in his response to the Big Listen, it'll go a long way. It won't be perfect because, as I say, fundamentally for me, right at the core of it, the challenge and accountability is a massive grey area. And when we look at Christine Gilbert's report, then we're trying to work out who it is that is going to shape Ofsted and ensure that it does what it's supposed to do. Because apparently its governance body, the board, is not capable of doing that. So who is going to ensure for this to be credible? He has to throw the entire process completely open to scrutiny. Yeah. It has to be, there has to be, whether it's the Common Select Committee, which obviously hasn't even met yet in its new form. The previous Select Committee did a fantastic job. The hearings were brilliant. They heard amazing testimony from all across the sector. Maybe that's the route, but there needs to be maybe a point of a special committee. Maybe that's what has to happen. It's very difficult when you look at the legislation that Ofsted's founded on, because as Christine Gilbert points out, it's an almost unique in its structure. This very strange relationship that with the governors, that they don't appoint. It's very unusual for an organisation like Ofsted to have a board of governors that doesn't appoint the chief inspector. The chief inspector is a crown appointee chosen by the Secretary of State, has very unusual set of independent abilities. But
isn't that the point, Edmund? It's meant to be apolitical in that sense. It's meant to be like a civil service in the sense that should it not be returned to an apolitical civil service, which is completely devoid, much like the Bank of England was taken out of that, wasn't it? Because the Bank of England was depoliticized and given its autonomy to be able to make decisions separate from government. Do we need an Ofsted decoupled from government? An Ofsted that is basically accountable to us, because let's be honest with you, schools are accountable to a board of governors. We need an Ofsted accountable to schools, accountable to us, the people that it inspects. The parents itself keeps talking about parents and everything else, but how much contributions did parents make towards Ofsted? Equally, how much was that in the alternative big list? How much input? Because at the moment, the social contract with education is waning. People aren't getting involved in education in the way they used to. Parents now blaming schools a lot of the time, and that culture has been fostered by government because school fails, and you see the local press, the head teacher has to resign. This blame culture of attacking schools, attacking teachers, undermining us, blaming us when the kids don't do well has come down from the top, and Ofsted has enforced that and forced that narrative to such an extent our profession is undermined. Because it is literally that we're not trusted. I'm not trusted to educate children, and I'm doing it wrong because some guy's going to come in externally and inspect me. This horrible system they've created is destroying the confidence of many of us in the teaching profession because we're being ground down and almost used, I go so far as to say, as political tools. So we need almost decouple, I think, the Ofsted from the political system, get it out, make it independent. It is meant to be anyway.
Sorry, Edmund, can you try and wrap that up in 1 minute?
I can, yeah, very quick. No, we have to reset the entire philosophy, and it has to be about improvement, and that's what I'll bring it back to. Is this whole thing started because of punitive consequences, high stakes, all of that stuff that needs to be diffused. The only point of Ofsted should be improving the educational opportunities of children. That is what it should exist for. That is what we should all aim to do, and that is what the system should support. There.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm going to go and cut Brent off there. No more questions. Listen, we've been following this, I think, as a bit of a group for a while now. So we really thank all your inputs over the time. Obviously, we wish it never came to this situation, but it has. And let's see kind of where things go forward. And maybe in a year, it'd be great, in a bit longer time to come back and revisit and kind of see where we are. But again, gents, thank you very much for your insights. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Edmund.
Very much. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
Cheerio, Edmund.
Cheers.
Cheers, Frank.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Yeah, thank you. So if you follow Chris Wilkinson, if you jump over to podcasts, what's it called?
Podbean.
Podbean. Thank you very much. We want to say just one last thank you to our sponsors. We've got John Katz Educational, publisher of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning to schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore a full range of titles and use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your books. And we've also got a big thank you to Futurum Careers, that provide a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. They help teachers show their students what they can aim for and how, from articles and activity sheets, animations to podcasts. All resources align with the Gatsby benchmarks and are free to download. Please visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. So not bad. I said 10 minutes over and we've managed to do it. So I'm going to call it quickly. We've got 10 seconds.
Thank you to our comments. We had lots of good comments coming there as well.
That came up. I'm sure there'll be lots of more on Twitter. Thank you, Brent, and thank you to Frank and Edmund for their contributions tonight. We'll come back to this story in probably 6 to 12 months and kind of see where we are. Next week, we're going to be looking at maths, particularly. That's maths, Brent. And
maths.
Yeah, maths. And we've got Dr.
Maths
Tom.
when I do that, or maths when I go 1 and 1 is 2.
We've got Brent coming on, not Brent, we've got Dr. Tom Bennison coming on to talk about kind of what's going on with maths, because one of the things we left with the old government was this kind of push for maths, and we can kind of see how that might be going forward, and this potential, should we still should maths still be compulsory all the way up to 19 until we get grade 4s with the results that are coming through. I hope everyone has a deep sleep over the weekend as they kind of settle into their new school term. And again, with all the issues that we've raised tonight, please make sure that you are seeking help and support if need be, if you do have any kind of mental health issues. I know a lot of schools now have a mental health officer or someone they can contact, but please reach out to your communities if you are feeling kind of overwhelmed, stressed, or kind of, you're having a crisis essentially with mental health during the workload, because that's not
never a sign of weakness either.
It's not a sign of weakness. Reach out and get that support. Okay, have a good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Good night.
Full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused